Mother Bear licked away the IV tape. So gently, no one dared stop her. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The rain hammered against the windows of Pine Valley Medical Center like angry fists. Dr. Cassandra Vale pulled her white coat tighter as she walked through the dimly lit hallway. It was past midnight, and the small clinic felt different at this hour. Empty, cold, the kind of place where shadows seem to move on their own. She stopped outside room 302 and peered through the glass window. Inside, 3-month-old baby Riley Chen lay in his crib, connected to an IV drip. The tiny boy had been fighting a severe infection for days now. His parents, David and Maria Chen, had finally gone home to rest after spending 72 hours straight by his side. Poor little guy, Cassandra whispered to herself. The fourth tape on Riley's arm looked irritated and red. She made a mental note to check it again in an hour. The clinic was quieter than usual tonight. Only 2 nurses were on duty. Marcus Webb, a gentle giant of a man who had worked here for 15 years, and Sarah Mills, fresh out of nursing school, but already showing incredible instincts with the patients. Cassandra walked to the nurses' station where Marcus was updating patient charts. "How's he doing?" she asked, nodding toward Riley's room. Marcus looked up, concern creasing his weathered face. "Vitals are stable, but that IV site is bothering him more than it should. He keeps trying to pull at it even in his sleep. I noticed that too. The tape might be too tight." Sarah appeared from the supply room, carrying fresh blankets. "I've been watching him through the monitor. He seems restless, almost like he's trying to tell us something." Before anyone could respond, a sound echoed through the clinic that made all 3 freeze. It was low, deep, and definitely not human. The sound seemed to come from somewhere near the main entrance. Marcus stood up slowly, his chair creaking. "Did you hear that?" Cassandra nodded, her heart beginning to race. What was it? The sound came again, closer this time. It was followed by what sounded like heavy footsteps in the lobby. "Security cameras," Marcus whispered, moving toward the computer monitor. His fingers trembled slightly as he pulled up the lobby feed. The screen showed nothing but empty chairs and the reception desk. But as they watched, a massive shadow moved across the floor just outside the camera's range. Sarah grabbed Cassandra's arm. "Should we call the police?" Before Cassandra could answer, the lights in the hallway flickered. Once, twice. Then they went out completely, leaving only the emergency lighting casting eerie red glows along the walls. That's when they heard it again. The sound was definitely closer now, and it was accompanied by something else. Something that made Cassandra's blood run cold. The soft squeak of the main door opening. In the darkness, they could hear slow, deliberate movements coming down the hallway toward them. Heavy breathing that didn't sound human at all. And underneath it all, a strange snuffling sound, like something large was following a scent trail. Marcus reached for the phone, but his hand stopped halfway. Through the emergency lighting, they could see an enormous silhouette moving past the nurses' station. It was heading directly toward room 302, toward baby Riley. Cassandra's medical training kicked in. Whatever was happening, her patient was in danger. She took a step forward, but Marcus caught her arm. "Don't," he whispered urgently. "Look." The silhouette had stopped outside Riley's room. In the red emergency light, they could finally see what it was, and none of them could believe their eyes. A massive black bear stood on its hind legs, nearly 7 feet tall, with one huge paw pressed against the glass window of Riley's room. The bear's head was tilted, as if it was studying something inside. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. The bear's ears twitched at the sound, and its head turned slightly in their direction. For a terrifying moment, intelligent dark eyes met theirs through the gloom, but instead of charging or showing aggression, the bear simply turned back to the window. It lowered itself to all fours and began moving toward the door of Riley's room. "It's going inside," Marcus breathed, barely audible. The door handle turned with a soft click. The bear pushed the door open with its massive head and disappeared into the room where baby Riley lay sleeping, completely unaware of the wild creature now standing just feet away from his crib. The 3 medical staff stood frozen in the hallway, their hearts pounding so loud they were sure the bear could hear them. Through the open doorway, they could see the massive creature moving with surprising grace around the small room. The bear's breathing was deep and steady, not the aggressive huffing they expected from a wild animal. Cassandra felt every instinct screaming at her to rush in and protect her patient, but something held her back. The bear wasn't acting like any wild animal she'd ever heard about. There was a strange calmness to its movements, almost like it knew exactly where it was going. The emergency lighting cast dancing shadows on the walls, making the scene look like something from a dream or a nightmare. Cassandra couldn't decide which. Inside the room, the bear approached Riley's crib with steps so careful they barely made a sound on the linoleum floor. The baby stirred slightly, his tiny fist moving toward his face, but he didn't wake up. The IV tube swayed gently with his movement. Marcus grabbed Sarah's hand as they watched through the doorway. His palm was sweating, but his grip was steady. "What is it doing?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely a breath. The bear had reached the crib now. It rose up on its hind legs again, towering over the sleeping infant. For a moment that felt like hours, the massive creature simply stood there, looking down at Riley. Its dark eyes seemed to be studying every detail of the tiny human before it. Then something extraordinary happened. The bear's expression softened. If anyone had told Cassandra that a wild bear could look gentle, she would have laughed. But there was no other word for what she was seeing. The fierce predator's face had transformed into something almost tender. Slowly, carefully, the bear lowered its enormous head toward the baby. Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was when everything would go terribly wrong. But the bear didn't hurt Riley. Instead, it began to sniff around the IV site on the baby's arm. Its massive nostrils flared as it took in the scent, and then it made a sound that none of them had ever heard from a wild animal before. It was almost like a whimper, but deeper, sadder. It's concerned about something, Marcus whispered in amazement. The bear's attention was completely focused on the red, irritated skin around Riley's IV tape. The baby's arm was clearly bothering him, even in sleep. His little fingers kept twitching toward the site, as if trying to scratch at it. What happened next made all 3 medical professionals question everything they thought they knew about the natural world. The bear began to lick the IV tape with its massive tongue. But it wasn't the rough, aggressive licking of a predator. The tongue moved with incredible gentleness, barely touching the adhesive. Each stroke was deliberate and careful, as if the bear understood exactly how fragile the tiny human was. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "It's trying to help him." The tape began to loosen under the bear's careful attention. Riley stirred again, but instead of crying or showing fear, the baby made a soft cooing sound. His eyes fluttered open, and when he saw the massive creature above him, something impossible happened. Riley smiled. The bear paused in its work, looking down at the baby's face. For a moment, the 2 beings simply gazed at each other. The baby's tiny hand reached up toward the bear's snout, and the massive animal lowered its head just enough for the small fingers to brush against the black fur. Cassandra felt tears streaming down her face without realizing she was crying. In all her years of medicine, she had never seen anything like this. The connection between the baby and the bear was beyond anything science could explain. The bear returned to its gentle work on the fourth tape. Each lick was precise, loosening just enough adhesive without disturbing the IV line itself. It was as if the animal had medical training, understanding exactly how to remove the irritating tape without harming the patient. As the last piece of tape came free, the bear stepped back slightly. Riley's arm was now free of the red, inflamed adhesive, and the baby stretched his little limbs with obvious relief. The fourth line remained perfectly in place, held by a small, clear bandage that the bear had carefully avoided. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. How did it know to do that? How did it know the tape was causing problems? Before anyone could answer, they heard something that made their blood run cold all over again. From somewhere outside the clinic came another sound. Not the deep rumble of the bear inside Riley's room, but something higher pitched, more urgent. It was crying, but not human crying. Sarah gripped Marcus's arm tighter. There's another one out there. Through the window, they could see movement in the parking lot. The emergency lighting from inside cast just enough glow to reveal a smaller shape pacing back and forth near the main entrance. It was making distressed sounds, calling out into the night. A cub, Cassandra realized with growing amazement. That's a mother bear, and her cub is outside. Inside Riley's room, the massive bear had heard the cries too. Her head turned toward the window, and she made a low, comforting sound in response. The crying outside became more urgent, more desperate, but the mother bear didn't leave Riley's side immediately. Instead, she looked down at the baby one more time, as if making sure her work was complete. Riley gazed up at her with wide, trusting eyes, completely unafraid of the wild creature that had just performed what could only be described as a miracle. The bear gently nuzzled the baby's hand with her snout, a gesture so tender it made Cassandra's heart ache. Then she turned toward the doorway, where the three humans still stood in shocked silence. For a long moment, the mother bear's intelligent eyes met Cassandra's. There was something in that gaze that spoke of understanding, of a shared knowledge about caring for the vulnerable. Mother to caregiver, protector to protector. The bear walked toward them, and instinctively they stepped aside to let her pass. She moved through the hallway with the same careful grace she had shown in Riley's room, heading toward the main entrance where her cub waited. But as she reached the nurse's station, she stopped. The bear turned back toward them, and in her eyes was something that looked remarkably like gratitude. Then she continued toward the exit, leaving the three medical professionals to stand in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Riley's soft babbling from his room broke the spell. The baby was awake now, cooing happily and moving his arms freely without the restrictive tape. His vital signs on the monitor showed marked improvement, his heart rate steady and strong. "Did that really just happen?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. Marcus nodded slowly, still staring toward the exit where the bear had disappeared. "I've been working in medicine for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like that." Cassandra walked back to Riley's room, her mind racing. The baby looked up at her with bright, alert eyes, reaching his tiny hands toward her. When she checked his IV site, she found that the bear had done exactly what she would have done herself. The irritating tape was gone, replaced by the kind of careful, gentle treatment that only a mother would provide. But how had a wild bear known to do such a thing? And why had it chosen to help a human baby instead of seeing it as prey? As if in answer to her unspoken questions, She heard voices from outside. Angry, frightened voices getting closer to the clinic. "I'm telling you, I saw it go in there." The voice was sharp, male, and filled with panic. "A massive black bear bigger than anything I've ever seen. It went right through the front door." Cassandra's stomach dropped. She recognized that voice. It was Tom Bradley, a local hunter who lived about 2 miles from the clinic. He was known for his aggressive stance toward wildlife, especially predators he considered dangerous to the community. "Are you sure it went inside?" Another voice, this one belonging to Sheriff Jake Morrison. "The doors should be locked at this hour." "I'm telling you what I saw. That thing could have killed someone by now. We need to go in there with guns blazing before it's too late." Marcus appeared at Cassandra's side, his face pale. "Doctor, Vale, we have a problem. That's Tom Bradley out there, and if I know him, he's not coming to observe wildlife." Through the window, they could see flashlight beams dancing across the parking lot. At least 4 men were approaching the clinic, and the metallic glint in their hands told a terrifying story. They were armed. "They're going to kill her," Sarah whispered, tears already forming in her eyes. They don't understand what really happened here. The voices were getting closer, more agitated. Tom Bradley was clearly working the other men into a frenzy, describing the bear as a dangerous predator that had invaded human territory. "Think about it." Tom's voice carried clearly through the night air. "A wild bear breaking into a medical facility? It's probably rabid, diseased. We can't let it get back to the forest where it might attack families, children." Cassandra felt a surge of protective anger. The bear they were describing bore no resemblance to the gentle creature who had just performed what could only be called a medical miracle on baby Riley. But how could she possibly explain that to armed men who saw only a threat to be eliminated? "We have to do something," she said firmly. "We can't let them hurt her." Marcus looked at her with concern. "Doctor, Vale, what can we do? We're medical professionals, not wildlife experts, and they have guns." Before Cassandra could answer, they heard the sound of the main door opening again. The men were entering the clinic. "Spread out," Tom Bradley's voice echoed through the lobby. "Check every room. That thing could be anywhere, and it's probably looking for a place to make a den." Heavy footsteps moved through the hallway, heading in their direction. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, creating wild patterns on the walls. Cassandra made a decision that surprised even herself. She stepped out into the hallway, directly into the path of the approaching hunters. "Stop right there," she called out, her voice carrying all the authority of her medical training. The flashlight beams converged on her, temporarily blinding her. Behind the lights, she could make out the shapes of 4 men, all carrying rifles. "Dr. Vale?" Sheriff Morrison's voice held surprise and relief. "Thank God you're safe. We heard there was a bear in here. Are you injured? Are there other staff members with you?" "Sheriff, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Cassandra said, stepping closer despite the weapons pointed in her general direction. "The bear is gone. She left peacefully, and nobody was hurt." Tom Bradley pushed forward, his rifle still raised. "Gone? How do you know it's gone? Did you see it leave?" "Yes, I saw her leave. She came in, spent a few minutes in one of the patient rooms, and then left to rejoin her cub outside." "Her cub?" One of the other men, someone Cassandra didn't recognize, sounded skeptical. "You're telling us a mother bear with a cub broke into a medical facility and just left?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Cassandra replied firmly. "And if you'll put those weapons down, I'll explain what really happened here tonight." Tom Bradley laughed harshly. "Doc, with all due respect, you don't understand wild animals like I do. A mother bear with a cub is the most dangerous thing you can encounter in the wilderness. They kill anything they perceive as a threat to their young. Then explain this, Marcus said, appearing beside Cassandra with baby Riley in his arms. The infant was awake and alert, looking around at the strange men with curious eyes. Explain how a dangerous mother bear managed to be in the same room with this baby for over 10 minutes, and he's completely unharmed. The men's flashlights focused on Riley, and several of them lowered their weapons slightly. The baby gurgled happily, reaching his tiny hands toward the lights. Sheriff Morrison stepped forward, his expression confused. "What do you mean she was in the room with the baby?" Sarah joined them, carrying Riley's medical chart. The bear entered room 302, where Riley was sleeping. We watched through the doorway. She didn't hurt him. In fact, she helped him. Helped him? Tom Bradley's voice was incredulous. A wild bear helped a human baby? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. "Look at his IV site," Cassandra said, gently moving Riley's arm so the men could see. The tape was causing irritation and inflammation. The bear removed it so carefully that she didn't disturb the IV line at all. It's something we would have had to do ourselves in the morning. The men gathered closer, their flashlights illuminating Riley's arm. The evidence was undeniable. The fourth line was perfectly intact, held in place by the clear medical bandage, but all traces of the irritating adhesive tape were gone. How ... Sheriff Morrison started, then stopped. How could a bear know to do something like that? Before anyone could answer, a new sound reached them from outside. It was different from the cub's earlier crying. This was a low, mournful howl that seemed to go on forever, filled with such sadness that it made them all shiver. "What was that?" the unnamed hunter asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tom Bradley raised his rifle again. "That's the mother calling, probably calling other bears to come help her attack." But Cassandra knew better. She had heard that sound before, during her residency at a veterinary clinic years ago. It was the sound of an animal in deep emotional pain. "She's grieving," Cassandra said softly. "That's not a call for help. That's the sound of a mother who has lost something precious." The howl came again, closer this time. It was answered by the higher-pitched cry of the cub, but even the baby bear's voice carried a note of distress that was unmistakable. "We need to go outside," Cassandra said suddenly. "Something's wrong." "Are you crazy?" Tom Bradley stepped in front of her. "We're not going out there with a grieving mother bear. That's suicide." But Cassandra was already moving toward the exit, driven by an instinct she couldn't explain. The others followed reluctantly, the hunters keeping their weapons ready. Outside, the scene that greeted them was heartbreaking. The mother bear sat in the middle of the parking lot, her massive head tilted toward the sky as she continued her mournful howling. Beside her, a small cub paced frantically, occasionally nuzzling against her side as if trying to comfort her. But it was what lay a few feet away from them that made Cassandra gasp in horror. Another cub, smaller than the first, lay motionless on the asphalt. Even from a distance, it was clear that the little bear was badly injured, possibly dying. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "There were 2 cubs?" The mother bear's behavior suddenly made perfect sense. She hadn't come to the clinic as a predator. She had come as a desperate mother, seeking help for her injured baby. When she saw Riley, another vulnerable infant, her maternal instincts had kicked in, and she had done what she could to ease his discomfort. But now her own cub was dying, and there was nothing she could do about it. Tom Bradley started to raise his rifle again, but Sheriff Morrison put a hand on his arm. "Wait," the sheriff said quietly. "Just wait." The mother bear had stopped howling and was now looking directly at them. Her dark eyes, which had seemed so intelligent and gentle in Riley's room, were now filled with desperate hope. She stood up slowly and took a few steps toward them, then stopped. She looked back at her injured cub, then at the humans again. The message was clear. She was asking for help. "She wants us to help her baby," Marcus said in amazement. "That's why she came here in the first place." She somehow knew this was a place where the hurt are healed. Cassandra felt her heart breaking as she looked at the scene before her. The mother bear's faith in them was both touching and terrifying. How could they possibly help a wild bear cub? And even if they could, what would happen afterward? But as she watched the mother bear's desperate vigil over her injured baby, she knew she had to try. Some instincts transcended species, and the need to protect the young was the strongest of all. "We have to help her," she said firmly, stepping toward the injured cub. "Doctor, Vale, no," Tom Bradley called out. "You can't approach a wild bear with her cubs. She'll kill you." But the mother bear didn't attack as Cassandra approached. Instead, she stepped aside, giving the human access to her injured baby. Her dark eyes never left Cassandra's face, and in them was a trust so complete it was almost sacred. As Cassandra knelt beside the injured cub, she could see the extent of its injuries. The little bear had been hit by a car, probably while crossing the road with its family. Internal injuries, possible broken bones, severe trauma. In the wild, this cub would die within hours, but they weren't in the wild anymore. They were at a medical facility, with trained professionals and life-saving equipment. The mother bear made a soft sound, almost like a question. She was asking if Cassandra could save her baby. Looking up into those hopeful, desperate eyes, Cassandra made a promise that would change all their lives forever. "We'll try," she whispered. "We'll do everything we can." The mother bear seemed to understand. She lay down beside her injured cub, positioning herself so she could watch both her baby and the humans who had promised to help. Her massive paw gently touched the little bear's head, and she made soft, encouraging sounds. Tom Bradley lowered his rifle completely, his face a mask of confusion and awe. "I've been hunting for 30 years, he said quietly, "and I've never seen anything like this." Sheriff Morrison nodded slowly. "We need to call Doctor Patricia Wells. She's the closest veterinarian, about 40 minutes away. If anyone can help that cub, it's her." 40 minutes might be too long," Cassandra said, carefully examining the injured animal. "This little one needs immediate attention. Marcus, can you help me get him inside?" "Are you serious?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with concern. "We're talking about bringing a wild bear cub into a medical facility." "We've already had one bear inside tonight," Marcus pointed out, already moving toward the supply room. "And look how that turned out." As they prepared to move the injured cub, something unexpected happened. The healthy cub, who had been staying close to its mother, approached Cassandra. The little bear was no bigger than a medium-sized dog, its fur a rich chocolate brown that seemed almost golden in the emergency lighting. The cub sniffed at Cassandra's hands, then gently nuzzled her palm. It was a gesture of trust that brought tears to her eyes. "He's accepting you," Sheriff Morrison said in amazement. "Baby animals usually run from humans." "Not these cubs," Marcus observed, returning with the stretcher modified for the small patient. "This whole family seems different somehow." Working together, they carefully lifted the injured cub onto the stretcher. The mother bear watched every movement intently, but she didn't interfere. She seemed to understand that these humans were trying to help. As they carried the cub toward the clinic entrance, the healthy baby bear followed alongside, occasionally touching its sibling with a tiny paw. The mother bear brought up the rear, moving slowly and deliberately, her eyes never leaving her injured child. "This is unprecedented," Tom Bradley muttered, still carrying his rifle but no longer pointing it at anyone. "A whole bear family trusting humans like this. It goes against everything I know about wildlife behavior." Inside the clinic, they set up an impromptu treatment area in the largest examination room. Cassandra worked quickly to assess the cub's injuries, while Marcus monitored vital signs and Sarah prepared medical supplies. The mother bear positioned herself in the doorway, large enough that she could see everything happening but not so close as to interfere with the medical work. The healthy cub curled up beside her, both of them watching the humans with intelligent, hopeful eyes. "Internal bleeding," Cassandra announced after her initial examination. "Possible broken ribs, definitely some organ damage, but he's young and strong. If we can stabilize him, he might have a chance." As she worked, inserting an IV line and administering pain medication, Cassandra became aware of something extraordinary. The mother bear was making soft, rhythmic sounds, almost like she was singing to her injured baby. The little cub's breathing seemed to stabilize in response to his mother's voice. "She's doing what we do," Sarah whispered in wonder. "She's providing comfort during a medical procedure." Dr. Patricia Wells arrived exactly 37 minutes later, her veterinary bag in hand and her face set with professional determination. She was a small woman in her 50s with silver hair and hands that moved with practiced efficiency. "I got here as fast as I could," she said, then stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the scene before her. "Dear God, when Sheriff Morrison said you had an injured bear cub, I didn't expect this." The mother bear looked up at the new arrival, her dark eyes assessing this fresh human. After a moment, she seemed to make a decision. She made a soft, chuffing sound and moved slightly to give Dr. Wells better access to her baby. She's giving me permission to treat him," Dr. Wells said in disbelief. "In 40 years of veterinary practice, I've never seen anything like this." Working together, the two doctors began the delicate process of treating the injured cub. They discovered that while his injuries were serious, they weren't necessarily fatal. With proper care and time, the little bear could recover completely. As they worked, something else remarkable happened. The healthy cub approached baby Riley's crib, which had been moved to the same room so the human baby could continue to be monitored. The little bear rose up on its hind legs, just as its mother had done earlier, and peered at the human infant. Riley, still awake and alert, looked back at the cub with curious eyes. Then, to everyone's amazement, the baby human reached out his tiny hand toward the baby bear. The cub stretched out one small paw, and for a moment, human and bear cubs touched. "Are you seeing this?" Tom Bradley asked, his voice filled with wonder. "It's like they recognize each other as babies." The moment was interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching outside. Sheriff Morrison looked out the window and groaned. "Media," he said. "Someone must have called about the bear sighting." Within minutes, the parking lot was filled with news vans, reporters, and curious onlookers. Camera flashes illuminated the windows, and voices could be heard discussing the unprecedented wildlife incident. "This is about to become a circus," Dr. Wells said grimly. "And that's the last thing these bears need right now." But the media attention brought an unexpected visitor. A tall woman with graying hair and kind eyes appeared at the clinic entrance, showing credentials to the deputies Sheriff Morrison had stationed outside. "I'm Dr. Elena Rodriguez," she announced as she entered the treatment room. "I'm a wildlife behavioral specialist from the university. I drove down as soon as I heard about what was happening here." She stopped short when she saw the scene. Two doctors working on an injured bear cub while the mother and sibling watched peacefully, and a human baby reaching toward his wild counterpart. "Extraordinary," she breathed. "This goes against every established pattern of wild bear behavior." Dr. Rodriguez approached the mother bear slowly, speaking in soft, calm tones. To everyone's surprise, the massive animal allowed the specialist to come quite close. "She's not just any bear," Dr. Rodriguez said after observing the family for several minutes. "I think I know who this is. There have been reports for months about an unusual black bear family in this area. Local residents have nicknamed the mother Gentle because of her non-aggressive behavior toward humans." "Gentle?" Marcus asked. "You mean she's been observed before?" "Multiple times. She's been seen protecting her cubs from aggressive males, sharing food sources peacefully with other wildlife, even leading lost hikers back to safety. The scientific community has been fascinated by her behavior, but we've never been able to observe her this closely." Dr. Rodriguez pulled out a small notebook and began making observations. "The level of trust she's showing toward humans is unprecedented, and the way she sought out medical help for her injured cub suggests a level of cognitive reasoning we've rarely documented in wild animals." As the night wore on, more remarkable developments unfolded. The injured cub's condition stabilized, and he began to show signs of recovery. The healthy cub had appointed himself as a guardian for baby Riley, positioning himself near the human infant's crib and making soft, protective sounds whenever anyone approached. But perhaps most amazing of all was what happened when baby Riley began to cry. The healthy bear cub immediately stood up and began making gentle humming sounds, the same comforting noises his mother had been making for his injured sibling. Riley's crying stopped almost immediately, and he looked at the young bear with fascination. "It's like they're communicating," Sarah observed. "Like they understand each other's needs." Dr. Rodriguez was furiously taking notes. "This could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies communication and empathy." The cubs seemed to recognize each other as vulnerable young, regardless of species. Outside, the media frenzy was growing. Reporters were demanding access to the miracle bears, and social media was exploding with hastily taken photos and wild speculation about what was happening inside the clinic. Sheriff Morrison fielded call after call from state wildlife authorities, zoo officials, and government agencies, all wanting to know about the situation and what would be done with the bears. "They want to relocate the family," he told the assembled group. "Take them to a wildlife preserve or zoo where they can be studied." The mother bear seemed to understand the tension in the room. She looked around at all the humans, then at her two cubs, one recovering on the medical table, one protectively watching over the human baby. Her dark eyes seemed to be assessing the situation, making decisions about her family's future. Then she did something that surprised everyone once again. She approached Cassandra directly, looking into the doctor's eyes with an intensity that was almost human. The bear made a series of soft sounds, varying in tone and pitch, almost like she was trying to speak. "She's trying to tell you something," Dr. Rodriguez whispered. "I've never seen anything like this before." Cassandra found herself responding instinctively. She reached out her hand, and the mother bear gently touched it with her massive paw. For a moment, woman and bear stood connected, sharing some form of communication that transcended species barriers. Then the bear turned toward her cubs, making decision-making sounds that clearly meant something to the young ones. The healthy cub looked between his recovering sibling and the human baby, seeming torn between staying and following his mother. The mother bear made another series of sounds, and the healthy cub reluctantly moved away from Riley's crib. But as he passed the human baby, he gently touched the infant's hand one more time with his paw. "They're saying goodbye," Cassandra realized with a mixture of sadness and awe. But just as the bear family seemed ready to leave, a new complication arose. The injured cub, still weak from his ordeal, tried to stand up to follow his mother and brother. His legs gave out immediately, and he collapsed back onto the examination table with a soft whimper. The mother bear's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. She rushed back to her injured baby, nuzzling him gently and making worried sounds. It was clear that the little cub wasn't ready to travel, but the family couldn't stay at the clinic indefinitely. Dr. Wells checked the injured cub's vital signs again. He needs at least another 12 hours of monitoring, possibly more. Moving him now could cause serious complications. The mother bear seemed to understand the dilemma. She looked around the room at all the humans who had helped her family, then made a decision that would change everything. She settled down beside the examination table where her injured cub lay, clearly indicating that she intended to stay. The healthy cub curled up beside her, and all three bears fixed their gaze on the humans around them. The message was clear. They were placing their trust completely in these humans, even if it meant staying in an environment that should have terrified them. "She's choosing to stay," Dr. Rodriguez said in amazement. "A wild bear mother is choosing to remain in human care to ensure her cub's recovery. But their decision to stay was about to create complications none of them could have anticipated." Outside, the crowd was growing larger and more demanding. Government officials were en route, and there were already discussions about what to do with a bear family that had become too comfortable with human contact. The phone rang, and Sheriff Morrison answered with growing concern. After a brief conversation, he hung up and turned to the group with a grim expression. "That was the State Wildlife Department," he said. "They're sending a team to collect the bears tomorrow morning. All three of them are being classified as habituated to humans and will be relocated to a facility for behavioral assessment." The mother bear's ears twitched at the tension in his voice. She may not have understood the words, but she clearly sensed that something was wrong. Her protective instincts kicked in, and she moved closer to both of her cubs, her eyes scanning the room for potential threats. "What does that mean exactly?" Cassandra asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. Dr. Rodriguez shook her head sadly. "It means they'll be taken to a facility where they'll be studied, tested, and ultimately placed in captivity. Bears that are deemed too comfortable with humans are never released back into the wild." The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. This remarkable bear family, who had shown such intelligence, empathy, and trust, would spend the rest of their lives in cages because they had dared to seek help for their injured child. "That's not right," Sarah said firmly. "They came here because they needed medical help. They trusted us. We can't betray that trust by letting them be locked up." Tom Bradley, who had been quiet for the past hour, suddenly spoke up. "There has to be another way. I came here tonight thinking I was dealing with dangerous predators. Instead, I've witnessed something miraculous. These bears don't deserve to lose their freedom because they were smart enough to seek help." The mother bear, sensing the growing tension in the room, began making soft, reassuring sounds to her cubs. But her eyes remained watchful, alert to the human emotions swirling around her. It was then that baby Riley began to cry again. Not the distressed crying of earlier, but a softer sound, almost like he was trying to communicate with his new bear friends. The healthy bear cub immediately responded, moving back toward Riley's crib and resuming his gentle humming. The human baby's crying stopped, and he reached out toward the young bear with obvious affection. Watching this interplay between the human and bear cubs, Cassandra felt a surge of determination. Whatever it took, She wasn't going to let this extraordinary family be separated and imprisoned because of bureaucratic policies that couldn't account for the miracle she had witnessed tonight. "We have until morning," she said firmly. "There has to be something we can do." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her notes, her expression thoughtful. "Actually, there might be. I've been documenting everything that's happened here tonight. This level of cognitive behavior, the medical instinct, the interspecies communication. It's groundbreaking research material." "What are you thinking?" Sheriff Morrison asked. "Academic protection," Dr. Rodriguez explained, her voice gaining excitement. "If I can present this family as subjects of critical behavioral research, we might be able to establish a protection protocol. The university has connections with wildlife preservation groups that specialize in keeping exceptional animals in their natural habitat." Tom Bradley stepped forward, surprising everyone. "I want to help. I know I came here with different intentions, but what I've seen tonight, these bears deserve better than a cage." Before anyone could respond, they heard a commotion outside. Voices were raised in argument and car doors were slamming. Sheriff Morrison peered through the window and cursed under his breath. "David and Maria Chen are here. Riley's parents. Someone must have called them about the situation." Everyone in the room froze. How could they possibly explain that their baby had spent the evening in the company of wild bears? The clinic's front door burst open, and David Chen rushed in, followed closely by his wife Maria. Both parents looked frantic, their hair disheveled and their clothes hastily thrown on. "Where's Riley?" Maria called out, her voice edged with panic. "We got a call that there was some kind of emergency at the clinic." David spotted the crowd gathered in the examination room and pushed through. "What's going on? Why are there so many people here? Where's our son?" He stopped dead when he saw the scene before him. His 3-month-old baby lay peacefully in his crib, reaching out to touch the paw of a bear cub who was standing protectively beside him. In the corner, a massive mother bear watched the interaction with gentle eyes, while, on the examination table, another bear cub was connected to medical equipment. "What? What is this?" Maria whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. The mother bear looked up at the new arrivals, and for a moment there was tension in the air. These were the parents of the human cub she had helped earlier, and her protective instincts were on high alert. But then, baby Riley made a happy gurgling sound and reached toward his parents. The mother bear seemed to understand the family connection, and her posture relaxed slightly. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," Cassandra said carefully, "I know this looks frightening, but Riley is completely safe. In fact, these bears may have saved his life." "Saved his life?" David's voice was barely controlled. "There are wild bears next to our baby." Marcus stepped forward with Riley's medical chart. The 4th tape was causing serious irritation and potential infection. If it hadn't been removed tonight, Riley could have developed complications that might have required surgery. "And the bear removed it?" Maria asked incredulously. "Not just removed it, Doctor," Wells added. "She removed it with surgical precision. I've been a veterinarian for 40 years, and I couldn't have done it more carefully myself." As if to demonstrate the peaceful nature of the situation, the healthy bear cub made his soft humming sound again. Riley immediately turned toward the sound, his face lighting up with joy. "He recognizes that sound," Maria said in wonder. "He's responding like he knows that little bear." "They've been communicating all evening," Sarah explained. "The bear cub seems to understand when Riley needs comfort, and Riley responds to the cub's presence." David moved closer to his son's crib, his initial panic giving way to amazement. "This is impossible. Wild animals don't behave this way." This family isn't like other wild animals, Dr. Rodriguez said. They've been documented showing unusual intelligence and empathy for months. What we're witnessing here is unprecedented in wildlife behavioral science. The mother bear watched David approach his son, her dark eyes assessing this new human. When David gently picked up Riley, she made a soft questioning sound. She's asking if the baby is okay, Dr. Rodriguez interpreted. She's been concerned about his well-being all evening. Something extraordinary happened then. David, still holding his son, slowly approached the mother bear. Every instinct should have told him to run, but something in the bear's gentle demeanor made him feel safe. "Thank you," he said quietly, looking directly into the bear's eyes. "Thank you for helping my son." The mother bear tilted her massive head, studying David's face. Then she made a sound that was unmistakably acknowledgement, almost like she was saying, "You're welcome." Maria joined her husband, tears streaming down her face. "I've never seen anything like this. It's like she understands that we're Riley's family." The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of heavy vehicles pulling into the parking lot. Through the windows, they could see official government trucks with Wildlife Department logos. "They're early," Sheriff Morrison said grimly. "They weren't supposed to be here until morning." Dr. Rodriguez quickly pulled out her phone. "I need to make some calls. We might still be able to stop this, but I need time." The mother bear sensed the change in atmosphere immediately. Her ears perked up, and she moved protectively between her cubs and the windows. The healthy cub stopped his interaction with Riley and pressed close to his mother. Heavy footsteps approached the clinic entrance, followed by authoritative voices. "Dr. Vale? This is Agent Sarah Hawks from the State Wildlife Department. We're here to collect the bears that have been reported as problematic." Cassandra looked around the room at the extraordinary scene. The Chen family bonding with the bear family, the injured cub recovering under medical care, the peaceful interaction between species that should have been impossible. "We need more time," she called back. "The injured cub isn't stable enough to be moved." "Doctor Vale, we have our orders. These animals have been classified as dangerous due to their unusual behavior around humans. They need to be relocated immediately for public safety." Tom Bradley stepped toward the window where Agent Hawks could see him. "Agent Hawks, I'm Tom Bradley. I've been hunting in these woods for 30 years, and I'm telling you these bears are not dangerous. Mr. Bradley, we appreciate your input, but our policy is clear. Any wild animal that seeks out human contact is considered potentially rabid or behaviorally compromised." Dr. Rodriguez was speaking rapidly into her phone, trying to reach contacts at the university. But it was clear that bureaucratic wheels moved slowly, and they were running out of time. The mother bear seemed to understand that a decision point was approaching. She looked around the room at all the humans who had helped her family, then at her two cubs. Her expression was one of profound sadness, as if she knew their time together was ending. Then she did something that brought tears to everyone's eyes. She approached baby Riley one last time, gently nuzzling the infant's hand with her massive snout. Riley giggled and tried to grab the bear's fur, completely unafraid. The bear turned to David and Maria, making soft sounds that somehow conveyed gratitude and farewell. Then she moved to Cassandra, pressing her great head gently against the doctor's hands in what could only be described as a hug. "She's saying goodbye," Maria whispered, crying openly now. "She knows they're going to take her away." The healthy bear cub was reluctant to leave Riley's side. He kept looking back at the human baby, making distressed sounds. His mother called to him gently, but he seemed torn between following his family and staying with his new friend. Just then, the injured cub on the examination table made a weak crying sound. All attention turned to him as his vital signs began fluctuating on the monitor. "He's going into shock," Dr. Wells announced, moving quickly to stabilize him. "The stress of the situation is affecting his recovery." The mother bear rushed to her injured baby's side, making urgent, worried sounds. She looked up at the doctors with desperate eyes, clearly asking them to help. "You can't move him now," Cassandra told Agent Hawks firmly. "Medical intervention is required immediately, or this cub will die. Dr. Vale, we have specialized veterinary equipment in our transport vehicles. We can treat him en route to the facility." "No," Dr. Wells said firmly. "This cub needs intensive care in a controlled environment. Moving him now would be a death sentence." Agent Hawks appeared in the doorway, a stern-looking woman in her 40s wearing official wildlife department gear. Behind her stood 2 other agents carrying tranquilizer equipment. "I'm sorry, but we have our orders," she said, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty when she saw the scene before her. The mother bear positioned herself between the agents and her cubs, her protective instincts finally overriding her trust in humans. For the first time all evening, she looked genuinely dangerous. "Everyone step back slowly," Agent Hawks instructed, reaching for her tranquilizer gun. "Wait," Dr. Rodriguez called out, still on her phone. "I'm talking to Dr. James Peterson at the university. He wants to speak with you directly about establishing research protection for this family." "Ma'am, we can't delay this any longer. The longer these bears remain in human contact, the more difficult their rehabilitation will become." It was then that something unexpected happened. Baby Riley, sensing the tension in the room, began crying loudly. The healthy bear cub immediately moved toward him, ignoring the adults in their conflict, focused only on comforting his friend. The sight of the baby bear trying to soothe the human infant while armed agents prepared to capture his family was too much for David Chen. "You're not taking them," he said firmly, stepping between the agents and the bears. "These animals saved my son's life. I won't let you repay their kindness by imprisoning them." Maria joined her husband, still holding Riley. "Our baby has bonded with this family. Look at them together. This isn't dangerous behavior, it's miraculous." More people began arriving outside. Word of the standoff had spread through the community, and local residents were gathering to show their support for the bears. Some carried signs reading, "Save Gentle's family," and "Heroes don't belong in cages." Tom Bradley surprised everyone by stepping outside to address the crowd. "Folks, I came here tonight planning to hunt these bears, but what I found inside changed my mind completely. These animals aren't threats, they're teachers. They're showing us what compassion really looks like." The crowd's response was immediate and supportive. Chants of "Save the Bears" began echoing through the parking lot. Agent Hawks found herself in an increasingly difficult situation. The community support, the media attention, and the unusual circumstances were all complicating what should have been a routine wildlife removal. Inside the clinic, the injured cub's condition was stabilizing again thanks to the quick medical intervention. The mother bear watched every movement of the medical team, her trust in them evident despite the tension with the officials. Dr. Rodriguez finally got off her phone, her face flushed with excitement. "Doctor, Peterson is flying down from the university tonight. He's bringing emergency documentation to establish this bear family as subjects of protected behavioral research." "How long until he arrives?" Sheriff Morrison asked. 3 hours, maybe 4. Agent Hawks shook her head. "We can't wait that long. We have other situations to handle, and these bears need to be processed tonight." But just as the situation seemed hopeless, an unexpected ally arrived. A black sedan pulled up, and out stepped a distinguished older man in an expensive suit. "Who's that?" Sarah asked. Sheriff Morrison squinted through the window. "That's Judge Harold Morrison, my uncle. What's he doing here?" Judge Morrison strode into the clinic with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He looked around the room, taking in the entire situation with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Agent Hawks," he said formally, "I'm here to issue a temporary restraining order preventing the removal of these animals until a proper hearing can be conducted. Judge Morrison, with respect, you don't have jurisdiction over wildlife management. Actually, I do when it involves potential violations of research protection statutes and emergency medical situations involving endangered species." "These bears aren't endangered," Agent Hawks protested. "No, but their behavior is. What we're witnessing here represents a unique opportunity to study interspecies communication and cognitive development. Removing them without proper scientific evaluation would be a violation of several federal research protection acts." The judge pulled out an official document. "This restraining order gives us 72 hours to conduct proper evaluations and hearings. During that time, these bears are under court protection." Agent Hawks read the document, her expression growing more frustrated. "This is highly irregular." "So is everything else that's happened here tonight," Judge Morrison replied. "Sometimes irregular situations require irregular solutions." The mother bear seemed to sense that the immediate threat had passed. She relaxed slightly, though she remained protectively close to her cubs. The healthy bear cub, apparently understanding that he was safe for now, returned to baby Riley's side. The human infant had stopped crying and was reaching out to his bear friend with obvious joy. "What happens now?" Maria asked. Judge Morrison smiled. "Now we wait for the university researchers to arrive, and we document everything. If these bears are truly as remarkable as everyone claims, then the scientific community needs to study them properly before any decisions are made about their future." Dr. Rodriguez was already back on her phone, coordinating with her colleagues. "We'll need to set up proper observation protocols, behavioral documentation, and medical monitoring for all the animals involved." "Including Riley?" David asked. "Especially Riley." The bond between these cubs, human and bear, could represent a breakthrough in understanding early childhood development and interspecies communication. As the night progressed, more researchers began arriving. The clinic transformed from a medical facility into an impromptu research station, with scientists documenting every interaction between the bear family and the humans. The injured bear cub continued to recover, responding well to treatment. His mother never left his side, but she allowed the medical team to work freely, seeming to understand that they were helping her baby. The healthy cub and baby Riley had developed an extraordinary friendship. The bear cub seemed to understand the human baby's needs instinctively, responding to his cries with comforting sounds and gentle touches. But as dawn approached, everyone knew that the real challenges were just beginning. The temporary protection would only last 3 days, and during that time, they would need to prove that this bear family deserved something no wild animal had ever received: the right to remain free while maintaining their connection to the human community that had helped them. Outside, the media circus continued to grow. News trucks from major networks had arrived, and the story was trending on social media worldwide. The hashtag #SaveGentlesFamily was spreading across the internet, with people from around the globe expressing support for the remarkable bear family. But with fame came new dangers. Not everyone supported the idea of wild bears living near human communities, and counter-protests were beginning to form. Some groups argued that any wild animal showing unusual behavior should be removed for public safety, regardless of how gentle they appeared. The mother bear seemed to sense the growing complexity of their situation. She spent more time watching the windows, alert to the crowds and activity outside. Her protective instincts were on high alert, even as she continued to show trust toward the humans who had helped her family. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Cassandra looked around at the scene that had developed over the night. Human and bear families had formed bonds that transcended species. Scientific discoveries were being made in real time. A community had rallied to protect creatures they had learned to see as neighbors rather than threats. But she also knew that the hardest part was yet to come. In 3 days, they would face a hearing that would determine the fate of the most remarkable animal family any of them had ever encountered. The question was no longer whether these bears were dangerous. It was whether human society was ready to accept a new kind of relationship with the wild creatures who shared their world. Day 1 brought unexpected complications. Dr. Peterson from the university arrived with a team of behavioral specialists, but so did Dr. Miranda Cross, a wildlife expert known for her strict stance on maintaining barriers between humans and wild animals. "This situation is exactly what I've been warning against for years," Dr. Cross announced to the assembled media outside the clinic. "When we allow wild animals to become comfortable with human contact, we create dangerous situations for both species." Inside the clinic, the research team was making remarkable discoveries. The mother bear, whom they had confirmed was indeed the famous Gentle, showed cognitive abilities that challenged everything they knew about bear intelligence. "Watch this," Dr. Peterson said, setting up a simple problem-solving test. He placed Riley's bottle in a clear container with a complex latch mechanism. "We want to see if she can figure out how to open it for the baby." The mother bear studied the container for several minutes, her dark eyes examining every aspect of the mechanism. Then, with surprising dexterity, she manipulated the latches in the correct sequence and retrieved the bottle. But what happened next stunned everyone. Instead of giving the bottle to Riley, she carried it to her own injured cub, who was now awake and alert. She seemed to understand that her baby needed nutrition more than the human infant who had other caretakers. "Remarkable," Dr. Peterson murmured, making notes. "She's demonstrating not just problem-solving ability, but prioritized decision-making based on need assessment." The healthy bear cub had also become a subject of intense study. Researchers observed him carefully mimicking human behaviors, reaching for objects the way Riley did, responding to human voices, even attempting to make sounds similar to human speech. "He's learning from the baby," Sarah observed. "They're teaching each other." But the peaceful research environment was disrupted when protesters arrived outside the clinic. Led by a man named Robert Thorne, who claimed to represent concerned citizens, the group carried signs demanding the immediate removal of the bears. "These animals are ticking time bombs," Thorne shouted through a megaphone. "Today they seem friendly, but what happens when they turn aggressive? Will you wait until a child is mauled before you act?" The counter-protesters, led by Tom Bradley and other local residents, responded with equal passion. "These bears saved a baby's life. They deserve our protection, not our persecution." The tension outside began affecting the bears inside. The mother bear became more restless, positioning herself between her cubs and the windows. Her ears constantly twitched at the sounds of the angry crowd. Dr. Rodriguez noticed the change immediately. The external stress is impacting their behavior. If this continues, it could undo all the progress we've made. That's when Maria Chen made a decision that surprised everyone. She approached the mother bear with baby Riley in her arms. "Gentle," she said softly, using the bear's local nickname. "I know you're worried about all the noise outside, but Riley isn't afraid when you're here. He trusts you completely." As if to prove her point, Riley reached out toward the massive bear, making happy babbling sounds. The mother bear's anxiety visibly decreased as she focused on the human baby's contentment. The human infant is having a calming effect on her, Dr. Peterson noted with amazement. This bond goes both ways. By evening of the first day, the injured bear cub was strong enough to move around on his own. His first action was to approach baby Riley's crib, touching noses with his interspecies friend through the bars. The moment was captured by photographers and became an instant sensation online. The image of the two cubs greeting each other was shared millions of times, with the caption, "Love knows no species." But fame brought new problems. By the second day, the clinic was surrounded by news trucks, protesters, supporters, and curious onlookers. The parking lot had been turned into a media circus that was making everyone nervous. Sheriff Morrison had to call in additional deputies to manage the crowd. "This is getting out of hand," he told Judge Morrison. "We need to find a more secure location for the bears. Moving them now could be seen as prejudicial to the hearing," the judge replied. "We need to maintain the status quo until the court can make a proper determination." It was during the second day that they discovered something troubling. Dr. Cross had been meeting privately with Agent Hawks and other wildlife officials, building a case for immediate removal of the bears. She's claiming that the bears' unusual behavior is evidence of neurological damage, Dr. Rodriguez told Cassandra privately. She wants to have them euthanized for scientific examination. The news hit the research team like a physical blow. The idea that these remarkable animals might be killed simply for being too intelligent and compassionate was unbearable. "We need more evidence of their cognitive abilities," Dr. Peterson said urgently. "Documentation that proves their behavior is natural evolution, not pathology." That afternoon, they got more evidence than they had hoped for. The healthy bear cub, whom they had started calling Buddy, began demonstrating behaviors that seemed almost supernatural in their sophistication. When Riley began crying during his afternoon feeding, Buddy not only made his usual comforting sounds, but actually brought over a small toy that had fallen from the baby's crib. The young bear had observed that the toy calmed Riley and had remembered to retrieve it when needed. "Tool use," Dr. Peterson breathed. "He's demonstrating purposeful tool use to comfort another species. This is unprecedented." But the most remarkable discovery came that evening. Maria was sitting beside Riley's crib, reading him a bedtime story, when both bear cubs approached to listen. As her voice rose and fell with the narrative, both young bears began making sounds that seemed to match the rhythm of her speech. "They're attempting to mimic human storytelling patterns," Dr. Rodriguez observed in amazement. "This suggests they understand that human vocalizations carry emotional and communicative content beyond simple needs-based signals." The mother bear, watching her cub's interaction with the humans, made soft, encouraging sounds. She seemed to approve of her babies learning from their human companions. But the peaceful evening was shattered by an emergency. Around midnight, alarms began blaring throughout the clinic. The injured bear cub, who they had named Hope, was experiencing complications from his injuries. Dr. Wells worked frantically to stabilize him while his mother paced anxiously nearby. The mother bear's distress was obvious to everyone, and her worried vocalizations filled the treatment room. "His internal injuries are more serious than we thought," Dr. Wells announced grimly. "He needs surgery immediately, or we're going to lose him." The decision to perform surgery on a wild bear cub was unprecedented. It would require specialized equipment, extended anesthesia, and recovery time that could last weeks. "If we do this surgery," Agent Hawks said, having been called in due to the emergency, "it will make the bears even more dependent on human care. It will be impossible to ever release them back into the wild." The mother bear seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. She approached Doctor. Wells and gently touched the veterinarian's hand with her massive paw, a gesture that clearly meant, "Please help my baby." "She's giving us permission," Dr. Wells said with tears in her eyes. "She's choosing her cub's life over his freedom." The surgery took 4 hours. During that time, the mother bear never left the waiting area outside the operating room. Buddy stayed close to baby Riley, both cubs somehow understanding that their friend needed comfort during this difficult time. David and Maria Chen had remained at the clinic throughout the crisis, unwilling to leave while their son's bear family was in distress. Their dedication to the bear family had not gone unnoticed by the media or the community. "These families have bonded in a way that transcends species," David told a reporter. "We can't abandon them now." When Hope finally emerged from surgery, weak but stable, the mother bear's relief was palpable. She approached her injured cub carefully, making soft maternal sounds that seemed to encourage him to keep fighting. But the surgery had changed everything. Hope would need weeks of medical care and rehabilitation. The question of releasing the bears back into the wild had become even more complicated. Dr. Cross seized on this development immediately. "This proves my point exactly," she told the media. "These bears are now completely dependent on human intervention. They can never survive in the wild again." As the third day dawned, the day of the hearing, tensions had reached a breaking point. Protesters on both sides filled the streets around the courthouse. Media from around the world had descended on the small town to cover what was being called the trial of the century. But inside the clinic, a quieter drama was unfolding. Hope was beginning to show signs of recovery, and his reunion with his brother was touching to witness. The 2 bear cubs nuzzled each other gently while their mother watched with obvious relief. Baby Riley, now 3 days older and seemingly aware of the stress around him, had become even more attached to his bear friends. When Buddy made his comforting sounds, Riley responded with his own vocalizations, creating what sounded like a conversation between species. "They're developing their own language," Dr. Rodriguez observed, "a communication system that bridges human and bear understanding." As the morning of the hearing progressed, more supporters arrived at the clinic. Tom Bradley had organized a group of local hunters who wanted to speak on behalf of the bears. "These animals have changed how we think about wildlife," he told reporters. "They've shown us that there's more to nature than we ever imagined." But perhaps the most surprising supporter was Agnes Hartwell, an elderly woman who lived alone in the woods near where the bear family had been seen throughout the year. "Gentle saved my life last winter," she told anyone who would listen. "I fell on the ice near my cabin and couldn't get up. That bear found me and stayed with me for hours, keeping me warm until my neighbor came looking for me." Her story was just one of many that emerged as the hearing approached. Local residents came forward with tale after tale of the bear family's unusual helpful behavior, guiding lost hikers, protecting smaller animals from predators, even helping to put out a small brush fire by bringing water-soaked branches. "This family isn't just intelligent," Judge Morrison observed privately to his nephew. "They seem to have developed a sense of community responsibility that includes humans." As they prepared to leave for the courthouse, the research team faced a dilemma. Hope was too weak to be moved, but separating the bear family seemed cruel. After much discussion, they decided that the mother bear and Buddy would attend the hearing while Hope remained under medical supervision. The decision to bring wild bears into a courtroom was unprecedented, but Judge Morrison had ruled that the bears were essential evidence in their own case. The mother bear seemed to understand the importance of the day. She allowed herself to be fitted with a special harness that would keep her secure during transport, and she remained calm as they prepared for the journey that would determine her family's fate. Buddy, following his mother's example, also cooperated with the preparation. But as they were about to leave, He broke away from his handlers and ran back to Riley's crib one last time. The young bear gently touched the human baby's hand, making soft sounds that everyone recognized as his way of saying goodbye. Riley, as if understanding the significance of the moment, gripped Buddy's paw with his tiny fingers. "He knows," Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Somehow, he knows this might be the last time they see each other." The image of the two cubs saying goodbye was captured by photographers and would later become one of the most famous photos in the history of wildlife documentation. As they loaded the bears into the specially equipped transport vehicle, protesters and supporters lined the streets. Some threw flowers, others shouted encouragement, and a few held signs reading, "Goodbye, Gentle," as if they expected never to see the remarkable bear family again. Inside the vehicle, the mother bear remained calm, but her dark eyes constantly scanned the crowd outside. She seemed to understand that all these humans were here because of her family, though she couldn't comprehend why their simple act of seeking help for an injured child had created such a massive response. The courthouse was surrounded by an even larger crowd than the clinic had been. Supporters and protesters filled the square, held back by barriers and police officers. News helicopters circled overhead, and live broadcasts were being transmitted around the world. "I've never seen anything like this," Sheriff Morrison told his uncle as they approached the courthouse. "This case has captured the world's attention." Judge Morrison nodded grimly. "That's what makes it so important that we get this right. Whatever we decide here today will set precedents for how humans interact with wildlife for generations to come." As they entered the courthouse through a side entrance to avoid the crowds, the mother bear and Buddy moved with dignity and grace. They seemed to sense the solemnity of the occasion, even if they couldn't understand the human concepts of law and justice that would determine their future. The courtroom itself had been specially modified to accommodate the bears. A secure but comfortable area had been set up where they could be seen by all participants while remaining safely contained. As the various parties took their seats, the magnitude of what was about to happen settled over everyone present. This wasn't just a hearing about two bears. It was a trial that would test humanity's willingness to evolve its relationship with the natural world. The mother bear, settling into her designated area with Buddy beside her, looked around the courtroom with intelligent eyes that seemed to understand she was fighting for more than just her family's freedom. She was fighting for the right of all wild creatures to be seen as individuals rather than just members of a species. Judge Morrison took his seat at the bench and looked out over the packed courtroom. Representatives from wildlife agencies, university researchers, local community members, and media filled every available space. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying the weight of history, "we are here today to determine the fate of a bear family that has challenged everything we thought we knew about the relationship between humans and wildlife. The decision we make will have implications far beyond this courtroom." As the hearing began, everyone present knew they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered long after they were gone. The question wasn't just what would happen to Gentle and her cubs. It was whether humanity was ready to accept that the natural world might be far more complex, intelligent, and worthy of respect than they had ever imagined.